Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of the Sales and Marketing Baldcast. I'm Chuck Coxhead, and I'm joined by my partner, John Kunzier of Aerial Digital. Welcome.
Welcome.
We have got an amazing topic for you today. It's something that I think that a lot of organizations don't even begin to consider, and that is ideal customer profile. Ideal customer profile. I'll take any customer, right, John?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we want to do. Sell to everybody.
Sell to everybody. An order's an order, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anybody ever had seller's regret?
Absolutely. Too many times.
Yeah. Anybody ever fired a customer?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yeah.
You know, if you've ever had seller's regret or if you've ever fired a customer, I think you have an inkling what ideal customer profile is, if only you had considered it up front. So, John, what's ideal customer profile to you?
So, to me, on the marketing side, it is a definition of the size, shape, color of a customer.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, how much revenue do they do?
Mm-hmm.
Where are they located?
Mm-hmm.
How many employees do they have?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a specific type of operation?
Yep.
Are they managing inventory?
Mm-hmm.
Are they selling to a particular industry?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I'm selling into government, that might be very different than if I'm selling into commercial.
Mm-hmm.
When we define that ideal client, that ideal customer, we want to actually understand all the attributes that allow us to identify who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go find those people in real life,
Yep.
right? We get a list, we understand it, things that we can say, this is an
Yep.
easy attribute for us to understand.
Yep.
So that we can market to them, we can sell to them, and that we can do that at scale.
It's kind of funny to talk about. You actually got to go find the attributes, right? That makes this a little bit more difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You actually have to do research. Yeah. So from, the sales side, what I think about is I come at it from two different perspectives. How do I easily identify a prospect and create a score for them that says, this is somebody that I want to go spend my time on? Because in essence, we're dedicating resources.
Right.
Okay, we're spending money by sending salesmen there. We're spending money by dedicating technology resources, by dedicating time, nurture campaigns, the entire 9 yards. And so we better make sure that we're getting a return on those resources to the best of our ability. So where are we going to go spend our time? And most importantly to me is back to that, have you ever had seller's regret? Who don't you want to chase?
Right.
That's really what it comes down to for me. More important than who do I want to go after, it's who don't I want to go after. All things being equal and push comes to shove, and I have limited resources, okay, who am I going to say no to? I got to make that hard choice.
Right.
And that's why it's really an ideal customer, right? I'll take any order, okay?
Right.
But with limited resources, we have to make choices.
Well, and to that point, right, if we find clients or customers that are not within that ideal prospect,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden we're going to have to do extra work.
Sure we are.
The minute we do extra work is the minute the profitability of that deal goes
Mm-hmm.
away.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're building custom code. Now we're delivering new things. Now we're doing crazy things that we would never think about.
Mm-hmm.
But because we signed that client and we think it's great, and then we're going to kind of justify it by saying, well, now that we do this, let's go find other people that look like this.
Sure.
And that's the wrong way to do it, because there might be two other people.
Mm-hmm.
It may be that client that you're doing that individual thing for is the only one in the world that does it that way.
Yep.
And I think I've had a few of those instances where we've gone down that rabbit hole and we've regretted every moment of it because we spent a lot of money and never got a return back. Versus saying, what's the big picture that we have to go after? Who should we be targeting? Right. And I think that's an important component that says, yes, you can go after a lot of different people, right, and different organizations. But if you do it well, you find a revenue stream. And what, in the marketing side, when we're looking at strategy, we used to call this thing called a fast-moving current, right? Fast-moving current, to me, says my ideal client, my ideal customer has a buying event, activity that's going to be happening. Maybe it's a change in regulation. Maybe it's a change in competition. Maybe it's some material we're not ever able to get, so we have to change something, right? There's some activity where we're identifying that fast-moving current, which then allows us to create exponential revenue growth. And those are things that, if done well, you actually can drive revenue into those segments and corner that particular market right? And again, those are some elements that we start to think about in who is our ideal client and how do we define who they are.
Well, I think we really need to talk about what our business model is too.
Right.
I can tell you that I was a very unpopular guy one time when I was at a job interview. It's a true story.
Just once?
Well, yeah, right. And I literally looked the owner of the company and all the directors of the company in the eye. There was 3 people at the table, and I said, "I'll tell you what. For your business model, if somebody slides a 1,000,000-piece order across the table, I'm going to slide it right back, and I'm not inclined to take it." And I can tell you that one of those directors did not want to hire me.
Yeah.
Well, why? Because we weren't suited to 1,000,000-piece orders. You simply didn't have the organization to be able to satisfy that. So to your point, what would you have to do? You'd have to adjust your business model. You have to adjust your operation to deal with a 1,000,000-piece order, when in reality, what we were actually suited for was a high volume of small orders.
Yes.
So we recognized that up front. And by the way, we didn't ever adjust the business model to go after that whale. What we did is we tripled, quadrupled, quintupled down on the business model that we had, and we created this metric around getting a whole large number of small customers to great success because we understood the business model, and we crafted an ideal customer profile based on that.
Yep.
So
and you didn't have to retool the business, right?
Right.
You could, all you needed to do was expand that business. The model was the same. The people were the same. Your processes probably need to be tweaked, but it allows you actually to drive more revenue by understanding who you're selling to. Those big deals sometimes seem really, really awesome, right? But if you're not prepared to do them, they can be the death of you.
Absolutely.
I had an organization I worked for who was targeting enterprise clients, right? And their business model was transactional. They did not have the cash reserves to actually go after a whale-based model. And guess what happened? They had cash flow problems.
What?
Oh my goodness, surprise, surprise, surprise.
No.
So we ended up going back to their transactional model, drove a lot of revenue in that transactional model, multiplied it by making it easy for people to buy, sold a ton of them, made the market move with us on that end, which gave us the cash flow to continue to go after that larger, those larger whales. So again, it's not just, it's inconvenient. We're missing an order. That order can drive you out of business.
Absolutely. And history is littered with companies that went out of business for doing exactly that.
Right.
Hyper-growth stories.
Yep.
They get a ton of cash. We're going to grow exponentially. Yay! So we can get our fancy car, we can get our house down in Miami, and we can do, nasty things with nasty people, only to end up on the scrap heap a few years later.
Right.
Because we really didn't understand our business model, and we certainly weren't targeting the right thing that was, that really got our start.
Yeah.
And that is, we came up with an idea, we came up with a business model, and we just went after some other whale or something that just wasn't suitable for us. Yeah. So that's crucial. And that, right, so we're ideal customer profile. We're really going to be talking about criteria, So now you have a couple of criteria in there, and they are revenue, size.
Yeah.
Okay. And it can turn into quantity if you're selling widgets.
Right.
It can be billable hours if you're selling services as a consultant. It can be any number of things. It could be licenses if you're selling a SaaS product. In theory, licenses don't cost anything to add additional, right? Oh, wait a minute, infrastructure.
Right.
My data center might not be able to handle that kind of growth.
And
so you have to your point, add more overhead to your business to satisfy that. So, but we're talking about size, revenue, quantity, that kind of thing as some of the criteria to kind of just to, get started talking about ICP.
Right. Yeah. And again, when we think about those, right, and maybe we're, it doesn't feel like we're going too far because ultimately, I just need to add infrastructure. Is my system designed to do the things that large companies want to do? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, again, I've come from the software world. Right, engineering and architecting, a multi-tenant environment is very different from engineering an individual enterprise solution.
Sure is.
Right, so you've got to really think about how you're going to deliver it along with it. So this, this concept of your ideal client has tentacles that go everywhere, and you have to really think about what those are before you put your foot in the toe in the water and say, we're going to go after X, right? and I've had too many CEOs and others that said, hell and high water will figure it out. Well, that doesn't seem to work, right? It never seems to work. We go off on a wild goose chase, and then 6 months later, we realize it's not working. We fire a few people, and then we change our course back to something we know.
Yep. Yeah, and which may have been ineffective in the first place, but that's a different topic for a different Baldcast, honestly. So,
and we potentially may waste thousands, tens of thousands, millions, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. I have a few examples of that where we didn't really understand who our market was, who our targets were, and really what their problems were. So we ended up wasting a bunch of money.
So let's go deeper there, right? So we've talked about size. That's size matters.
Just
saying.
Oh well, that's what they say.
Wow.
I don't know.
I don't believe it.
I don't believe it either.
I don't believe one bit of it. Nope.
Yeah, it's the driver of the car, not the
exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about the type of organization. Okay, so in the prep you brought up buying personas. I think there are different types of organizations that come from that look at business through a different lens. And why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
So for me, buying personas become the roadmap of who you need to talk to within an organization, and kind of the cheat sheet on how to talk to them. So an example I always use is I want everybody out there to picture an accountant. And if there are accountants, we love listening, you. We love you.
We love you.
And we know this isn't you, but the stereotype is, the older guy with the white shirt with short sleeves and the pocket protector and is really boring and blah, 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 right?
See, I think of the pocket protector as an engineer, but maybe it's because I am one. Go figure.
But we know that when we start to define that person, we can recognize who they are and how to talk to them. CEOs are, strategic thinkers, right? They're driving everything. They want vision. They're talking about X, right?
Yep.
If you're at the CIO level, they're more engineering-like, or, so we start to define who they are. And so that from a sales perspective and a marketing perspective, we know how to talk to them.
Yep.
Right. To me, that creates that committee feel that says, these are the 7 to 8 people that are going to be on my committee. And here are the 4 that we really, really care about selling to and messaging to.
Yeah. So when I hear that definition, I think that starts to tiptoe down the road of selling methodology, buying influences. But I still think the buying from my perspective, the buying personas is really, really important in that I think of organizationally, what's their lens. So you can have let's just stay on the CPA. CPA can be the CEO of a CPA consulting firm or CPA firm. Wonderful. They're going to likely have some sort of business lens. You can likewise have a CEO who's a CPA who's selling fintech software,
right?
And they're likely going to have a different lens. I will tell you, I had an amazing conversation with a guy yesterday, and I'm looking forward to some interesting conversations with him going forward. This guy is running a robotics company.
Oh, wow.
A robotics company. Take a guess what his background is.
Art.
He's a lawyer.
He's a lawyer.
He's a lawyer. God bless him. And so on the one hand, you might think of the persona as, I have this lens of looking at things from this legal perspective. So I might be risk averse or something to that effect. Interestingly enough, he introduced me to a new term yesterday called friendier. It's like he still believes in handshakes. God bless him. See, he has a different lens than I might suspect. And actually, for this robotics company, he's talking about productivity. And that's his lens. But when you think about what that background is, what's that buying lens of the company? So that person, that background can matter, but it's not an absolute. Right. It's really not an absolute. Yeah. And buying personas, I'm certain, is something we're going to get into in a lot more detail in another Baldcast. So,
yeah. Well, and again, I think from a persona perspective, right, we're looking at what the stereotype is.
Right.
Right. So if I'm running a construction organization,
right,
especially at a higher level, and I'm doing design build, more than likely I'm an engineer, right? I might be the CEO, but I'm more than likely going to be an engineer, some sort of construction professional around that. So you kind of know those people, right? But they do have different that lens is what makes them different,
Mm-hmm.
right? You may have someone with a similar background, maybe not as many years of experience,
Mm-hmm.
who's running your construction organization, for example,
Mm-hmm.
versus I'm running the whole company,
Mm-hmm.
right? Their lenses are going to be different because their purview is around their world,
Yep.
right? And they're in that position, even though they may have the same or similar educations. So that is part of what we're doing on the marketing side, is developing those ideal profiles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those personas that we're building, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we're starting to define. And then we want to actually, when we understand them, we then can build content for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I said this in our last one, where 60 to 80% of our clients are educating themselves. So we want to create that content, and ideally we have it targeted to the persona.
Well, we're gonna get back to that in a lot more detail, for sure.
Yeah.
But something that you said really resonated with me, and that is 80-90% of the people, if we know what the persona is of the CEO, by way of example, we can start to make assumptions about the company.
Yeah.
And and what may or may not be important to them. But of course, you know what happens when you assume. Okay, you make an ass out of you and me. Thank God for that little tidbit from, what was that, Bad News Bears?
I think so.
I think so.
Or Catholic school.
Yeah, one of those two. So, if you're either from Catholic school or movies better than I do, feel free to drop us a line and, slap me around. That'd be good. But, we don't want to assume. But it gives us a basis upon which we can begin to do our research.
Right.
Okay, so you have to do market research, and so that we can figure out what's really important to them.
Yeah.
And how does that go for you?
Well, for me, I think it starts with an acronym. Boy, that wouldn't come out.
Say it again.
Acronym.
See, you had it. You knew.
Yeah, I know it's there.
You totally knew.
So the acronym is MSU. MSU is making stuff up. No, when we're
that's sales.
That's sales, right? So
all right, that's car sales.
Right. So
that's different.
when we're thinking about MSU, right? MSU is when I build a message that I think is right, that I think is the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can get kind of close, right?
You
can do
in the ballpark
bunch of research. You can go on Google. You can talk to analysts. You can read industry papers. You can do all of that. But what you really need to do is that primary research where you're talking to people who are doing the actual job, who are in the field, and not just one, right? Because that's an opinion. What you're looking at is saying, I'm going to go interview 10 people that are doing that part. And now you're going to start looking at the commonality across. And everyone's going to say, hey, look, we're unique. This is the way we do it. And you're going to find out that those 10 people that you've interviewed, they all say the same thing, and they're all saying the same thing. And then from there, we start to build that realistic message. Ideally, when I'm out talking to people, we've done enough of our research that we have a good idea of what it is, but then we actually validate, and they give us the real skinny, right? When you're actually having that conversation and they say, well, let me tell you how that really works, right?
Well, here's the cool part about this, tying this back in an ideal customer profile. I might go down that road and find out they're telling me a bunch of stuff that I can't deliver. So now here's the big question. Am I talking to the right people? Am I doing research with the right people? And honestly, that's sometimes where your assumptions go wrong. I think I want to go here. I'm going to go ask these people because I've decided what I need first and foremost before I consider what the market needs or what individual customers need, and I charge forward. I might find that I've talked to the wrong people and I get knocked on my ear and I have to back up and go, whoa,
right?
Are these people actually in my ideal customer profile? And, really do some soul searching and, value proposition and blah, blah, blah. Without rehashing.
Well, again, if you think about it as your salespeople are your infantry, right? They're going to be going out. Back in the day, still today, we send a scout out. We understand what that scout looks like. So our investment is very low in identifying what's happening in the market. And what happens on the marketing end, and there's an aspect of marketing that nobody really talks about it anymore. We all talk about demand gen with emails and all of this. Well, there's a strategy side of this, right, which says, I now go out and begin to look at what's happening out in the market space, and I go talk to clients, and I go understand how good a fit our products are, and really help us redefine that ideal client. And what we find is opportunity in those conversations, or we find that we are going to finish last, right? So if we find that we're going to finish last in that market, we find another market. If we find opportunity, we go back and say, hey, with this, this, and this, we build the requirements. And there's a whole process of taking those market requirements documents and then delivering them back to our development teams or our product teams or services teams or whatever that is, and say, hey, we need something that looks a lot like this, and here's the value. And again, another whole podcast can be done on, you know, developing differentiation and in your development process, not in your marketing process, right? Creating differentiation and understanding what that is based on the research that you're doing, and then putting them into the product so that you create that differentiation moving forward. It starts with that ideal client, ideal prospect that you want to go after. And if you know those details, right, it's like scouting a sports team, right? If you know that they're susceptible for a long pass or a three-pointer or, you know, a goal on the right side because the defender's not good, well, you're going to go there, right? That's what we're really looking for, because our job on the marketing end is not only to do all of the emails and everything else, but it's to create the message and the value proposition and to help educate and train our salespeople to say, here's what you should be looking for why are we building this, right? Because ultimately, if we do it correctly, we're solving the most prevalent problems they have.
Well, interesting. I think that we should be training each other, honestly. I think that the same exact thing happens on the sales side, with one major caveat. Touching each one of those customers from the sales side costs a lot more money. It requires a lot more resources to put a salesperson in front of a person. And ideally, from my perspective, it's in front of a person.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. That's a different topic for a different day. You're going to hear that a lot from us because there's so many topics. God, these topics are so far reaching. You know, ideally put it in front of them. You know, I heard stats 20 years ago. It costs several $100s on average to put a person in front of a client on average. Okay. As opposed to sending out an email. Which is, I'm not advocating for the email. And that's not where this is going. It's just, you better make sure you're spending your time in the right places, because the impact is quite a bit higher from your resources. I'm not advocating you abandon that approach to selling. I think it's a crucial part of selling, putting the people in front of the people, in front of the prospects. But you really need to know where you're sending your people and where are you going to say no to. Because when a salesperson gets out there in the field, they're willing to talk to me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fantastic. I had a great day. Well, I understand that sales can be lonely and hard and hot and cold and all those things. It's not just golf and fishing. But that doesn't mean you had a good day.
Right.
Just because you talk to somebody. It's a good day if you talk to somebody and you advance the ball within your ideal customer profile. So let's back up. Let's back up here so we're starting with assumptions, and we start talking about, value proposition, and we'll get deeper into that. But there's one thing that you mentioned in prep that I don't want to gloss over, because if we don't mention it, I think in every single Baldcast, I'm probably going to be a little disappointed in us, and that was differentiation. So I just think that the differentiation is just crucial, because it affects who you're going after.
Yeah, it does.
If you're just going to go after all the same customers all the same way with the exact same value proposition, you're wasting your time. It may be that if you differentiate yourself, that you're finding an underserved or an unserved portion of the market where everybody's ignoring it, because you found a way to differentiate yourself and consider that value proposition. So again, it comes back to, who are you asking?
Right. Well, and the answer is, if you have no differentiation and other people are selling your products, you're selling a commodity. And by definition, it becomes a pricing game, right? Who's cheaper?
Yep.
Right? How can I get it faster? Can I get it cheaper? Obviously, clients are going to ask that regardless of what it is, right? But if you have a true differentiation, which you can then point to value, right, and quantifiable value, right? It's not, hey, it'll save you time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does that mean,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, if we know that the speed limit is 55 and we're doing 75, it's quantifiable that we're breaking the law.
Yep.
Right? That kind of quantification is what we need when we talk about differentiation, to say when we put this product in,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to save 25%.
Yep.
And again, not going back too far to the development side, on the marketing end, we should be creating a hypothesis when we build these tools, these products and services. We should start with a hypothesis of what we're going to save a client,
Mm-hmm.
and then prove it to be right or wrong going forward based on the research that we have. But to me, differentiation is built, not discovered, right? It's something that you build into your products because you did the research. You don't just by mistake go, oh gosh, we put this in there, our clients are doing this. And I hear that way, way too often. Oh, now we started to do this. And that shows that we didn't really do the research. And then magically, we've solved the problem because somebody put a function in that somebody bastardized and it did something else for them. And that's not the way to have a scalable success. It's not repeatable, right? You just happen to fall into something.
It can happen.
Forward. Yeah, it can happen.
I'll take it.
What? Pigs can fly too. So
yeah, I'm not going to invest my money in it and guarantee.
No.
That's a lottery ticket, right?
absolutely, we don't want
Yeah.
lottery tickets. We
Right.
want yeah.
So let's go a little bit further. So we've talked about some things. So you have to understand your customers. You have to understand your value proposition. You can't really you don't know who to ask. You don't know what to ask, and God help you in the answers you get if you do, and you don't really understand what it is you're trying to offer. They're going to be like, "Why the heck are you talking to me?"
Right.
But let's talk about what's really, really, really important to an organization. So, what are some of the criteria that are that we separate the wheat from the chaff? Rapid fire. What are some of the things that are really, really important to me as an organization in choosing that ideal customer?
Profitability.
Profitability, absolutely.
Is
Everybody talks about revenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
But profitability.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't make the margin on the product, we can sell a bunch of it, and we're just going to basically pushing paper and making nothing, right? I think deliverability. We talked about that, right? Scalability. When we look at the ideal client, if we want to be $100 million or $1 billion or whatever, does our ideal client support that number, right? So, again, that becomes a very important thing when we're starting to do forecasts. If the market supports $100 million and you think you're going to do $1 billion, there's a big disconnect within that. So understanding that ideal client, ideal prospect, and then looking at the addressable market that makes up, we then know how big and what's happening within that. Because again, if we think about revenue, profitability, deliverability, scalability, right, addressable market, those are things that we start to look at and say, here's why we think we should be going here. Right. And then the last thing is, how many of those have we sold so far?
Yeah.
Right. If you sold zero, your probability of is pretty low, right? Your risk is high and your probability is low because you haven't sold it yet. If you've sold 20 of them and it goes in like a glove and you have a really good idea of what that is and who you should sell and who you shouldn't, then that ideal prospect, an ideal client is well formed, right? And your risk is low and your probability is high.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about other criteria. I mean, it depends on where you're coming from. So, if I'm selling a business to consumer product, okay, I may want to be considering, clearly that so often comes down to price, but I may target the consumer who is more discerning, who values, who values reliability in a product, okay, who values the reputation of a product. What is it that they value? If I'm doing a solution sale, okay, do they have a continuous improvement methodology and culture within the company? Is that important to them if I'm trying to solve something for them? Or don't they really care? Or are they just looking at price? Do they value return on investment versus dollars spent? And that again comes back to that lens buying personas. You're at May, so that's how you begin with your assumptions is based on who you're talking to. But those kind of criteria are really important to me. So you have size, you have profitability, you have how they view value, and some of the other things is, I'm going blank here for a second as I'm literally going through my own ideal customer profiles from about 5 different companies for all these years. But, who is their target? Okay. Are they trying to grow quickly? Do we want to target hyper growth companies? That's not about evaluating their size. You evaluate their size from a list, they're going to be a $500 million company. But what does their future look like? I may want to shy away from them because their future could go from 500 million to 5 billion in very, very short order. Okay. Or maybe that's really attractive to me, right, because I have a lot of room to scale. I may want those. Now they're not whales. Okay. We've talked in the past, you've mentioned you got to have singles, doubles, triples, home runs, maybe we want to pepper that with some of those future whales. And place our bets on those folks. And that may be a criterion for an ideal customer profile. So it's about what we value. It's about what they look like, to your earlier point, and who we're going to target. So are any other criteria that come to your mind?
Well, I think it's also, gets to that, you're touching on the idea of, what's happening in that industry too, right? So if we think about the cannabis industry, if you were selling to them 5 years ago, it was in the infancy stage, right? You're going to make some bets in that market to say who's going to be a big player, and I'm going to sell it at that because we think that market's going to be, based on everything we see, right? So those are areas where you start to look at your industries to say where are we going to put our bets around that. And understand that those niches, right, the more specialized you get, potentially the more profitable you can be, right? Because again, if you find something that you can uniquely do and corner that, it's sometimes easier to target a $100 million market than a $1 billion market, but really corner that $100 million market, right? So again, it's going to depend on what your strategy is. It's going to depend on who your investors are also, right? If they're expecting a hockey stick growth, and you're going to be $1 billion in 2 years, that's a very different proposition than, hey, we're privately investing and right, it's the owner who's putting money in, and we want to get to this point.
Well, I think when you went down that cannabis example, I think tiptoed into something that resonates with me, is that I think about that, it's like, okay, we look at business size, we look at industry, and we have something that satisfies the cannabis industry, but there's different segments within that industry, any industry, okay, taking cannabis aside, because I'm no expert.
Me neither.
But, retail, distribution, transportation, compliance, production, all these different things. Finance. I may have a piece of technology that can technically satisfy all of them, but I may have a better understanding of distribution, right? Okay, and so, or transportation. Really cool. Friend of mine said he wanted to start a model where he was specializing in transportation of cannabis within the state of Virginia. Why? Because interstate transportation creates all kinds of regulatory hurdles and that sort of thing. So we had this really cool model. He knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to go from transporting the products, okay, from distribution to retailers within the state of Virginia.
Okay.
Then we can back into, okay, is there a size? Is the market big enough? All the different things. What are they trying to fix, accomplish, or avoid? But he had narrowed down and crafted his business model around that. And it's a story I hadn't even thought of until you brought it up there. But it just ties right into that ideal customer profile, because honestly, if you're in business and you've heard people tell stories over the years, you've probably heard them talk about their ideal customer profile over and over again, despite the fact that many businesses never do, and you may never have. But that's why we're talking about it today.
So. Well, and again, going to that initial ideal customer profile, and then in marketing we talk about adjacency, right? So is there a market next to what we're doing that's very similar to what we do?
Sure.
With minor tweaks, can we deliver it? Right? What do we have to do to retool? What's our message look like? Right? But we have to think about that as kind of a new market space, a new ideal client that we can address, even though our development effort might only be another 10%.
Yes.
To get where we need to be. Or when we discover and we dig in under the covers, it's not 10%, it's 50%.
Yep.
That's a very different story. But again, that's where your ideal client puts you in a strategic conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Too many times we're talking about our ideal clients as if it's a tactical decision. Hey, we're going to go after these people today. My ideal client today is this.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't feel very strategic,
Nope.
and you tend to kind of, you're in there and you're in for a week and you're out for somewhere else, right? And you're jumping around, and realistically, what you're doing is not doing anything.
Yep.
You're not selling anything. You don't give it enough time, and you haven't tooled to be there, and you're going to lose to people who do specialize.
Well, this adjacency thing, it's brilliant because it comes back to the point that I made at the beginning, is who you're going to say no to. So let's just say that I'm targeting technology for warehouse and distribution. Let's just say.
Yeah, just say.
I might have done that once or twice.
Or 4 times.
Okay. But I may make a decided choice that if for some reason they love us and they want to pull us into another aspect of their business, say you've got a company that has warehouse distribution, retail, POS, and transportation. Okay, but not production. Well, you would say you have 2 adjacent markets. Oh, we ought to be able to clean up in all 3 of those. Well, I might say yes to one, and I might say no to another for strategic and value proposition reasons. Retail POS, by way of example, might be very low margin. I don't know. I've never been involved in it. But your entry point is here, and then you make a decision as to where you want to go. Because technically within that organization, they're different customers. They are different profiles. The fact that it may be one large umbrella organization is kind of irrelevant. It's likely they're in divisions.
Yeah.
Right. And so the adjacency might make sense, but I'm going to when it comes right down to it, who am I going to say no to?
Right.
And that's crucial.
And again, you might, using your example, right, if we look at it and say the POS system, maybe there's a major player. There's a competitive factor to that. And maybe instead of us building it, we just integrate to it. Right? We connect to it. Right. The ideal, right, when we think about that ideal, if we can carve out a niche that we can get traction, it makes sense. And I'm thinking of one very specifically, right? If we go out in the majority of the world, right, when they want to go look something up, they Google it, right?
Yep.
They Google it. But we know that there's a penalty, right? Because they now, Google knows everything we do, right?
Yep.
What we're looking for. What size shoe we are, right? Whether we're looking for, tennis rackets or, sneakers, right? They know all of that. Interestingly, DuckDuckGo, right, has built an ideal client profile of people who don't want everyone to know what they're doing.
Curmudgeons.
Right? There are curmudgeons.
Well, I'm one.
Well.
I love DuckDuckGo.
Yeah. But it says, I don't want to be tracked. And you're going to use, and that's my target profile. I'm going to go find those people and say, are you tired of getting Alexa ads on something you just Google searched or you just mentioned, right? You mentioned it in front of Alexa, and now all of a sudden you're getting it in your feeds. So ultimately, DuckDuckGo has said, we can't go after that big competitor, Google. We don't have the bandwidth, but we can take this segment of the market and be very successful here. And we have potentially a different revenue model around it that we then can say, here's a really good instance of us being able to make money in that space, right? And interestingly, right, they're doing a lot of work around that. And Google's saying, maybe you can have that because it's not profitable for us to not track you.
Yep.
So again, that's part of the conversation when you're thinking about that ideal client. Because I always love it when, a small company goes and finds that ideal client, nurtures that market, develops that market, and then a big player goes in. Thank you very much for developing that for us. We're just going to make the changes to our product, and we're just going to actually consume you.
Just going to consume you.
We're not going to buy you. We're just going to consume your clients.
Bye.
At no cost.
Yep.
Right? Microsoft does that. Apple has done that. Others have done that.
Sure they are. Sure, Amazon's doing it.
Amazon's doing it.
It's so funny you brought up the Alexa thing. Some friends and I, we were away for a weekend a few years back, and somebody brought that up about Alexa listening. And someone had the idea that we were going to talk about fly fishing all weekend. And we purposely talked about fly fishing all weekend. This is a crazy story. I'm totally digressing.
It's okay.
We talked about it all weekend. A couple of days later, the radio played an ad about a fly fishing tour. Coincidence? I think not.
I don't think so. Not at all.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was talking about, the first time it happened to me, I was talking about knee braces. I'd hurt my knee, talking about knee braces right in front of my Alexa, and magically I got knee brace ads
Oh, yeah, I
on
don't
social
know.
media and other places. So
That hasn't happened to me, and I know that the radio, we're not that powerful to infect the entire radio station in the Philadelphia area.
yeah,
It's really just a fun story. Anyway, so let's get back. Sorry, I digress. But
it's totally okay.
yeah, let's get back to this definition. So, or summarize really. So, we have to understand to whom we're selling, okay, and we really need to understand who they are, what's their persona, what is their lens, what is the value proposition that you're offering, and how do you differentiate? Footnote, always the footnote's really super important. Okay, you have to do your research, both primary and secondary, and we didn't touch on that. Just go over primary and secondary once again, John.
So primary is really going out and talking to the market. Secondary is looking at industry papers, talking to analysts, doing Google searches, all of that fun stuff to really understand that market space. But you really want to talk to, a good set of research is talking to clients, talking to people
That's
that
primary.
are dealing with the problems all day long, and you'll get insights that you had no idea if you just ask people questions and listen, because people just want to be heard.
Yep. So what's really, really important to you? Okay, and how does it match your business model? Again, if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't want you to make any money, they're probably not that important to you, regardless of the revenue. Yeah. And the bigger that whale, the less likely they are to let you make money. That happens all the time. Okay, and ultimately, what we're trying to get to is who to target, right? Marketing needs to know who to target, and who do you say no to? We all have limited resources. We need to be able to investing our time, our money, our technology, and our efforts in the places that are going to give us the highest return on investment, not the place that makes us feel good.
Right.
The highest return on investment so we can achieve profitability. Do you have any closing thoughts there, John?
Well, just one last thing.
Oh, cool.
One last thing. And
Love it.
Again, when you're actually doing that research and you're actually talking to people and creating that value prop, ask them a simple question. How do they do it now? Right? If we actually ask that simple question and listen, we might find out that, hey, the problem that we perceive to be very large is not, or the problem that we perceive that is very small is huge. So again, it's very important for us to understand how they're doing it now. Do they have a workaround? Because again, I was involved in a project where we didn't ask that particular question and spent hundreds of millions of dollars in development and sold 11.
Because your suitability for that particular problem sucked.
Right. So again, when we think about it, ask those questions and understand, because ultimately, if you know the problem statement that you're solving and that problem statement has value to that client, it's going to be easy to sell, and you can point your inventory, your salespeople, in the right direction, and they're going to be effective and efficient in being able to tell that story with your product, and you know that you can deliver it. To me, that's success, right? That's the part of what we're trying to accomplish with ideal client profile, with a lot of tentacles connected to it.
Well, I'd like to leave it with this thought. It's not an exercise you just do and say, okay, and table it and walk away. It's something that has to become part of your culture. It's something you have to use every day. It's something you have to evaluate day in and day out against every prospect, every company you across whom you come, okay? And I like to give them a score. Create a set of criteria, create a scoring system so that I can prioritize these. Make it part of your culture, make it part of your sales process, make it part of your marketing process. Yes, it takes work. But would you rather spin your wheels and waste your time, resources on people who are not going to give you the return on investment, or would you rather do the upfront and go in and make sure you're targeting the right people? It has to be a process like everything. I believe in systems thinking in every part of an organization, and it's led from above. It's led from the CEO. It's certainly led from the VPs. And I think you'd be surprised if you've been to talk the language of ICP, how often it will come up in your senior leadership team meetings. Yes, well, we're not pursuing this because. Yes, we've got a strategic direction over this market segment because. And preach it, live it. That's what culture is about.
So I think that's amazing. That is, again, and that idea of client scoring, I think that's a whole podcast.
It may very well be a whole
I
podcast.
think it is.
What's a podcast? I do
Baldcast.
Baldcasts.
Baldcast. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Whole episode.
you darn kids.
I know.
Honestly, you and your kids and your newfangled language.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've had fun with this one, John.
Me too.
Thank you so much. Wait a minute. Oh, look, there you are.
I'm here. I'm here.
I've had fun with this, and thank you so much. We hope that you've learned something from this. Again, my name's Chuck Coxhead. This is my partner, John Kunzier from Ariel Digital. If you need to reach John, if you need fractional marketing services, we'll give you the information in this post. And if you need me, if you'd like some advice, you'd like some coaching, or you'd just like to chat about whatever technology I happen to be selling nowadays, feel free to reach out. We'd love to connect you on LinkedIn and whatever social platform you love. Thanks. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your patience and attention. We'll see you next time.